I met a guy named James Smith 3 years ago through work and we started dating. He had 2 jobs in 2 different cities, so I only saw him when he was in town. 1.5 years into our relationship, I got a message from a woman named Jane Smith telling me to stay away from her husband. James confessed to being married, but said the marriage was awful, and they were separated, and Jane was unwilling to divorce, so he had to wait until he could get a divorce without her consent. I believed him and we stayed together for another few months, until James gave me the whole truth. They weren't separated. They lived together in the other town. James only had the one job in my town, so he would come here, work, and see me, then go back to his wife. Jane found out, and James had spent the last few months regaining her trust and finding a new job in the town they lived in. So it was over with us. I was devastated. We'd been together nearly 2 years, and even with the affair, this was still the healthiest romantic relationship I'd ever had, and my kid loved him. When James left, I wrote him one final message, telling him that I loved him and I always would. And if things with Jane didn't work out, I would be here. I got a reply asking if I meant that, so I sent a response doubling down. I got another reply, still from John's account, written by Jane, calling me names, saying I had to learn a lesson. And within a couple of days, several accounts were plastering every social media platform with nudes I had sent to James, tagging me, calling me even more names, and adding my contact info. Every time I reported one, 2 more would pop up. At one point, Jane directly sent the pictures to my father. I had to leave my job and I move in with Dad. I was at my lowest, and I wanted to die. I did something really stupid, and had to go to a mental health facility to recover. This was all in the span of a few months. When I was out, my sister, Ollie, told me she'd messaged Jane, telling her what I had done. Jane took down the accounts. I got it confirmed that the accounts were gone, but the pictures are on the internet forever. I started going to therapy and looking for jobs, with little success with either. A few months later, Ollie told me that Jane would like to speak to me, but I refused to talk to her. A few more months passed and Ollie casually mentioned something Jane said. And that's how I found out she was talking to Jane. And they had been talking since Ollie first messaged Jane, months before. I asked Ollie if she was joking, and she said Jane was sorry and just wanted a friend. I asked why Ollie had to be that friend, and Ollie said that she and Jane had a friendship entirely separate to me and I should know by now to leave Jane's relationships alone. I didn't speak to Ollie for weeks after that, and when we reconnected last month, Ollie said she values her relationship with Jane and won't end it. Ollie can be friends with whoever she wants. I don't care anymore. I don't want a relationship with Ollie. The problem I'm having with that is that I am still living with Dad, and Dad wants Ollie here. She doesn't live here, but she visits multiple times per week. I only recently got a new job and can't afford to move out yet. We have other siblings and I've asked them and my stepmom for help, and they are staying out of it. I've said that even if I could just get a heads up for when Ollie is coming over, I could take my son out while Ollie sees Dad. But when I suggested that, Dad said he's not going to make Ollie ask for an invitation to come over. I feel like I have spent the last year at the end of a very fragile tether, and every time I see Ollie I feel like that tether gets closer to breaking. I don't want to put my mental health on other people, especially not Dad, but I can't be around Ollie. And no one seems to understand why. How can I convince my family to let me go and see with Ollie? Update. Short recap of first post. I was unknowingly in a relationship with a married man, James. When he told me he was married and broke things off, I sent a final message asking him to choose me over his wife, Jane. He replied asking if I meant it, so I doubled down. Jane was the one who replied, as a test, and when I failed she leaked my nudes on the internet and doxed me in the process. I lost my job, my mental health flatlined, and I ended up living with my dad. My sister, Ollie, then made friends with Jane, and I didn't want to have to talk to Ollie, who was always trying to talk to me. But Dad wouldn't let me go and see with Ollie while I was living in his house. The last 3 weeks have been a lot. First off, I heard back from this thing I applied for that I assumed I was rejected from. So I now have a new job lined up a few hours away that pays better. Will let me move out sooner, and will be a lot better for my son, in terms of the school options and me having more time to spend with him. Once I knew I had that, I sat down with Dad and Ollie, and said that while I knew I was not blameless in what happened, Jane's actions had driven me to suicide. And just knowing that Jane had a direct line to me through Ollie, and that Ollie had been reporting back to Jane, was affecting my mental health. I said I appreciated Dad helping me out, and I didn't want him to think that I was trying to dictate to him in his own home. but this was affecting me. So for the month until my new move-out date, I either needed Ollie to stop speaking to me, or a warning that she was coming so I could leave. Ollie said I was unreasonable, but Dad came around, saying that I wasn't asking for much. He told Ollie that from now on if she was coming over, she had to let us know, which was all I really wanted in the first place. Ollie then showed up, unannounced, 3 days later, with Jane. I grabbed my son, took him upstairs, and stayed with him long enough to convince him to stay there. When I went downstairs, Dad was tearing into Jane. When Jane saw me, she slapped me, and then started insulting me. Dad told her to get out. He gave Ollie an ultimatum, Jane or us, and Ollie refused to choose, so Dad chose for her. The next day, at least 3 new accounts had been created with my naked pictures on them, tagging my new social media. After that, Dad urged me to look into a legal case again, and his urging, plus the comments on the last post, convinced me. Dad went with me to meet a few different legal teams, and we ultimately decided to go with a civil case, which every legal team we spoke to said would be a lot less intensive and a lot safer for me in terms of my mental health. My team said they sent a letter to Jane's team, who have already asked to meet in mediation, and they think Jane wants to settle, as it was clearly a quick decision on their end, probably to stop me going for the criminal case given Jane's recent actions. My legal team are also handling the photos for me, taking down as many as they can using copyright. I debated posting this, but I've gotten a lot of messages asking for an update, and there were a lot of comments on my last post that encouraged me to do this exact thing. And I wanted to take the opportunity to thank the people who left those comments, because I probably wouldn't have done this without them. So, thanks. IDK if I need advice at this point, but if there's anything anyone can think of, it would be appreciated. Thanks again.